We're gonna call this meeting to order. And then perhaps I pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We having any changes or amendments to the agenda?
We do have one amendment. We do need to add a 1-3 swearing in a new board member.
So we're gonna adopt the adoption of the agenda. We need a motion to adopt the agenda
As
as
amended.
it is.
As amended.
With an amendment, with the amendment.
I move we adopt the agenda as amended.
We need a second. Noemi seconded. Everybody on favor say yes. Or no.
Yes.
Everybody in favor? Remove the agenda. Okay.
No,
Everybody in
we're-
favor? And now we have the affirmation of a new member. So you will repeat after me. I, Anabel.
I, Ana Gómez Mejía,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States,
of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and the laws thereof.
and the laws thereof,
and the policies of the Woodburn School District.
and the policies of the Woodburn School District.
During my term,
During my term,
I will faithfully
I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
of the school board member
of the school board member
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you. And the policy,
All right.
you're in.
Welcome, everyone.
Officially in. Okay, do we have public comments?
We do not.
Mhm. We have a work session. The number 3. 3.1, student investment account annual report. Presenter Director Sarah Bishop.
We'll have both Sarah and Krista Chapman
Okay.
joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So we're here this evening. I'm Sarah Bishop, the Director of Business.
And I'm Christy Chapman, the Director of Teaching and Learning.
So each year we'd like to give a brief update on the student investment account, just a quick run through to remind us of what the student investment account is, we've done with those funds for this year and what the plan is for the coming year as well. So this is our opportunity to do so. And we appreciate being here with you guys tonight. So this slide is pretty basic. It's something we'll probably bring up every single year, but these are the 4 pillars of the student investment account and what the state of Oregon has said we can spend these funds on. So it falls into some pretty broad categories here. There's a lot that falls under each of these objectives, but this is where we have to focus all of the spending for the student investment account. And it's surrounded around class size, well-rounded education, increased instructional time, and the health and safety of students. And this is put into law. This is not something that will change unless the law changes. So these are the 4 pillars of the student investment account. And you'll see as we move through the presentation how everything falls under these categories.
So when we wrote our plan, we came up with different things that we wanted to do for each of those categories that Sarah just explained. And so some of the things, I won't read through each of these, but some of the things for reducing class size is really focused around increasing FTE, like for instructional assistants, special education staff at the middle and high school levels. For well-rounded education, we look to increase access to arts education, especially at the elementary level, access to STEM, culturally responsive teaching and materials, which we're doing through things like AVID, TDG, which is the teacher development group for math, and through our language arts adoption process and our math adoption. So really looking for materials that are culturally responsive. Some of the other things for well-rounded education is really expanding our CTE opportunities for students, which is career and technical education. Increasing opportunities for students to learn about college and career opportunities once they leave our K-12, pre-K-12 system. And then the transitions between, elementary to middle, middle to high. And then for instructional time, we've really focused mostly on before and after school activities. Those are ways that we can, and summer school, sorry. Those are different ways that we can expand on instructional time and provide students opportunities that go beyond just the regular school day. And then for health and safety, it was really looking at different, we increased FTE to help enhance our supports for student mental and behavioral health and safety. And so in a couple of slides, we'll talk more specifically about the FTE. The plan does focus heavily around increase in staff. And so we'll talk a little bit about where we made those increases and where we will still make some additional increases.
I have a quick question. In regards to increasing experiences from middle school regarding college and career, does the district have an established plan? Does each middle school have a plan of students?
So one of the things that we did with the SIA plan is we increased, we hired a career explorations teacher for each of the schools. And so last year we had one that was shared between the two schools, and this year we now have one full FTE for each of the middle schools. And they have specific curricular materials that they're using that explore different careers that students can explore. So when they get to the high school level, they can they've had experience with a lot of different careers that they can then start to, decide which one they might be most interested in exploring further. So the middle school is really to explore like a lot of different careers. So when
but that would be increasing experiences for students who are enrolled in that class, not break down the French parity.
yes,
It would be students who take that class,
yes.
not all, for example.
Right, at the moment, not every student is getting that. We're also looking to implement a plan and profile through Naviance, which is an opportunity for all students. They have different modules within that they would do in their advisory periods. That's something that we're starting to implement this year, so we haven't done it yet, but we're starting the implementation of that. And so students explore different career modules within Naviance as a platform. And they set their own goals. They create action plans for what they're going to do to try to achieve that goal. Whether it's, if they have a goal that they want to go to college, like what are they doing to stay on path to be ready for college? What are they doing for a different career if they're not interested in going to college? And so there will be an opportunity for all students, but at the moment, at this very moment, it is students who are taking that course that have the most
But kind of going back,
opportunity.
it sounds like there isn't a plan.
There is, it's just not fully in place at this point, but through Naviance, there is a plan through the advisory period.
Okay, so I guess I'm thinking like if a parent wants to know what that plan looks like for their student in middle school. do they have-
Like an actual written plan, is that what you're referring to?
So like if a parent's interested in CTE or college, and know what's happening either at the high school level or middle school, even elementary. Is there a place for them to go on a website, to their school, a handbook? This is the pathway, this is what they're learning and what they have access to. Because what I'm hearing is that some students have access and not all students have access.
Yeah, at the moment, I wouldn't say that like parent facing and student facing materials are fully developed. And so that is an area where we can continue to
So the answer
improve.
At the high school, they are in the middle of developing. They didn't have the pathways before, so they're actually developing the pathways now as a unified high school. One of the issues around having a set of small schools, it's difficult to do those, but you don't have a wider range of staff or enough staff to go do that. So they are actually in the process of building, and they're making graphics and doing things so kids can actually understand how to develop those. And part of the reason that we're starting the pathway, the plan and profile earlier is to help students have some more time to plan before they get to high school. So every kid has that chance to do that, but that's something new that has not been done before. The plan and profile starting at sixth grade, all the way through 12th grade. So, you know, in the old days, your 4-year plan was started as a sophomore, and it's kind of like, okay, that's only a 3-year plan, because we're talking about afterwards. So those plan and profiles are starting earlier, and then the high school is like literally in the middle of developing the pathways because we're trying to get it ready for forecasting for students to go to choose the class that they want to be in. So yeah.
That's something that students will have.
Yeah, they'll have access to it. They have someone who's actually a staff member whose name escapes me at the moment, but I know she's actually organizing all of those things with the different departments to make sure that they've got some plan and profiles. We have some pathway things, but they're making it more explicit and easier for students to understand. Then it will be parent facing and student facing for all levels. Yeah.
So our allocation for the 21-22 school year was about 4.8 million. $115,000 of that is passed through to Arthur Academy as they're one of our charter schools. This amount will vary every year based upon our student enrollment. It's student enrollment driven, and also based upon the amount the state collects and the related tax as well. If you guys first recall, when the student investment account was rolled out initially, they have some pretty big projections of well over $5 million in that first year of us receiving. And if you recall, that went down pretty quickly to around $2 million. So this funding is really heavily dependent upon the tax that is collected at the state level and upon our student enrollment as well. For this current school year, we're at just a little, I think we're at $5,040,000 for the student investment account, of which about $120,000 will be passed through Arthur Academy.
So some of the FTE that we had talked about is listed on this slide, and so it goes through the different FTE that we had in place last year. So we did increase in our instructional assistants at the kindergarten level, so that there is instructional assistant support or educational assistant support in each of our kindergarten classrooms for at least half a day. We increased our special education FTE by 2. This helps with reducing caseloads. And for well-rounded education, some of the things that I talked about before, like the career exploration, last year we had 1 FTE between the 2 middle schools, and so they each had a half-time teacher teaching that career exploration class. We increased the college and career FTE at the high school. We added a position for that last year that we still have this year. We increased our homeschool contacts. They were specifically focused on working with our newcomer students and in the newcomer programs. And then we increased access to fine arts at the elementary level by adding art teachers to our elementary schools. And some increased FTE working in our newcomer programs at the secondary level so that students had more targeted supports to better meet their diverse needs. And then we also funded our instructional coaches out of this plan as well, that they're specifically focusing on the language arts and math work that we have going this year and then continuing on into the next few years. And then for health and safety, we increased our behavior specialists by 3 FTE, and then the social worker, we added 1 social worker. So these were FTE that we had in place last year. And some of the highlights of that, having those assistants in our kindergarten classrooms has been really beneficial to really provide more individualized support, and it's more adults to the students in the classroom, and so it's providing students with more opportunities as they transition into our K-12 system and when they're coming from preschool or students who haven't attended preschool yet. We have increased support for our students by reducing caseloads. This was something that we heard from our teachers that are our special ed teachers, that this was really a need, and so we were able to add 2 special ed FTE to help reduce caseloads, to be able to provide more support for our students. And then the newcomer support that I talked about is something that we have continued to focus on as our newcomer demographics have shifted the past few years. And so in order to be responsive to their needs, we've added FTE, both licensed and classified through the HSC to help provide more well-rounded education for students in our newcomer programs. We now have behavior specialists at every level, which is something that we did not have before. And so that has been a great addition, especially as students are transitioning back into classrooms the past, last year specifically. That was very beneficial positions to have. Those were beneficial positions to have. And then for well-rounded education, having those elementary art teachers prior to last year's students at all the schools did not have access to art. And so we now have art teachers, the career exploration classes. We have 2 FTE this year, as I explained before. So we have more students that are accessing those courses now. We did spend a lot of time with our ESOL and Language Arts Adoption Committee last year, building capacity within that team to be able to select culturally relevant materials for our students. And so we invested heavily in that work. And also AVID is another avenue that we have been putting into this plan that provides secondary teachers with different strategies to use in the classroom. It really promotes college and career readiness for all students, and it's a framework for promoting college and career readiness for students at the secondary level. So those are some of the highlights from the 21-22 school year that we invested in. Some of the schools also get some funding that's allocated directly to them that they can decide how to best meet the needs of their students. And so the schools invested pretty heavily at the elementary level in summer reading books for students. So they got a lot of books in students' hands. They sent home little backpacks with students so that they would have summer reading materials. French Prairie did the same thing. They invested heavily in books for students that they sent home with them last summer. Valor invested in some additional college and career readiness labs, so they were able to offer more sections of the college and career readiness courses last year. They decided to focus some of their money on offering more opportunities there. And then the high school did the same thing. They invested in some college and career ready labs that they're using in some of their courses. And then all of the schools had increased access to before and after school programs, which at the elementary level is the level that takes advantage of that the most, but there were increased opportunities at all of the levels. And then to close, our focus for this year, continue to focus on the same 4 areas, but we have basically the same FTE that we had last year. We've just tried to add to some of them. Something in particular that I want to point out is for the SPED teachers under increased instructional time. We have a program through Western Oregon that we are funding for teachers to become special education teachers. So there's a cohort of teachers going through that program so that we can expand the number of teachers we have in our district who can be special education teachers. And so it's kind of a grow your own program that Dana Christie is hosting through her department. Let's see here, if there was anything else I wanted to highlight. We also invested in calming corners. So classrooms now have calming corners, and that's something that was implemented this year. And wellness spaces at the high school for students. And then Student Services is also working with Heritage Elementary School to pilot a wellness room for students at the elementary level. And so trying to invest some of the money this year, focus on that health and safety piece that's specifically supporting students in different ways than we've done in the past.
Did you say that we had an additional FTE for college and career?
Yes, because in last year, Oh, no, you want to try to say the school years? Last year, we had one that was split between the two middle schools. This year, we have one at each of the middle schools. So we have two
Oh,
full-time.
this is middle school.
Excuse me, yeah.
I have just a question on the previous slide. Where it says, the highlights, I guess, were French Prairie, yeah. Why is the difference between French Prairie and Valor versus, you know, the reading and readiness labs?
So when schools get allocations for different funds that we have in the district, and so they work with their school leadership teams. And they look at their school improvement plans to determine how they're going to spend their funds. And so I don't know specifically how they came up with this this plan, but it's typically done with their leadership team or with one of their teams. Or they may have looked at their student data and decided that that was the direction that they wanted to go. So with the school allocation, they can figure out what their students at their school specifically need and then allocate their funds differently. But it's, yeah, it needs to be tied to like their school improvement plan or student outcomes. Mhm.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't know if I missed the number, but how many kids benefited from the program, from the CIA?
From the student investment account across the board, I would say every student, because there's been impacts at every building and across the district. So every student.
And I'm pretty sure the well-rounded education and all the stuff that is in different areas, they're referring kids, right? They're referring the students to the different areas of the program and so on.
The college and readiness labs. So they were classes for that essentially factors.
Those are materials that are used in specific classes. Yes, for Valor, yeah, the career exploration class. Well, each school has a full-time teacher now, so they have at least six sections. Mhm.
So in, what does this look like in numbers? So what is the amount that comes from?
The amount of money or
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to go back and pull that data.
Because materials, I mean, that doesn't sound like it's a lot of money.
It is. So the college and career readiness labs are pretty manipulative heavy and they're more of a one-time use. So we try and allocate a fair amount to each building for them to be able to actually do something productive with. It's not, you know, a $5,000 allocation for them to buy paper and pencils. They get a pretty significant chunk and it's based upon their student enrollment as well. But I'd have to go back and pull their specific amounts and have that in front of me.
And I have a question, I'm not quite sure how to ask it. So I'm thinking of, like our Russian students, for example. And I know, certain things are cut, so I'm just curious how. I'm curious, if I'm not quite sure what, how to form that question. And so how is the Russian program of Russian students, like positively impacted by this?
so they're impacted the same way as all the other students are through the different opportunities. But one thing in particular that we are doing with the Russian program is there is a lot of translations that we do with the curricular materials. And so we are working with staff internally and with outside vendors to make sure that we're getting everything translated as quickly as possible, so that it can be implemented, you know, because sometimes translations can take a lot of time, but we're investing really heavily to get it done as quickly as possible now, that we have funds like SIA. And so we're able to get those materials to teachers much quicker than we have in the past. So like, for example, we've got health materials that we have to do annual translations on because they get updated. We've got language arts materials now that are new. We'll have math materials. So we're using some of these funds to get those done more quickly, instead of, in the past, it was teachers like on Russian holy days would come together, they would group their kids differently and they would come together and work on translations. And so now we're centralizing it and doing it on a larger scale, so it gets done more quickly.
Anthony and Gustavo, do you guys have any questions?
No questions. Really excited to see the SIA dollars get to the students. I know when SIA first was passed in 2019 and then 2020 happened and we were kind of in a limbo across districts, we're across the state of, or are the dollars, is the money even coming in? We created this plan. So it's exciting to see it kind of being implemented now. In it's weird to say early stages 2 years later, but in its early stages still. So great work. Look forward to see that, what continued investments look like.
I have no questions. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Gustavo. I'm sorry. You know, we can talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Next on the agenda is 2022 Superintendent Board Consistent Program, presented by Janet Avila Medina, OSDA.
Situated here.
Mhm.
Right, let me just share my screen.
If we can make sure you're muted when you get into the,
Oh, yes.
now we'll have a really fun reverb.
So it's not letting me, let's see. I'm muted on my computer. Does that work, Jenny?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Let me get this out. Okay. Thank you, as I get kind of situated. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Janet Avila Medina, Board Development Specialist at OSBA, and today we're going to be talking about your superintendent transition program. You're a part of the search with, I believe, I don't know if it was Steve Kelly or Sarah that supported you in that. And so as part of that, there are some steps to take, which is called the transition program. And I'll be walking through that, giving you an overview because it's been a while. That's primarily what tonight's going to be about. But before I dive into the focus areas and really the meat of tonight, I want to get to know you a little bit. It's really important when it comes to work sessions, aside from board meetings, to spend a little bit of time to get to know each other at the individual level. We're going to be talking about why. For the superintendent transition program, one of the things that we stress about it is to have you be set up and set the tone for the relationship you're going to have with the superintendent, who is a really important partnership in all the work that you do. And it's really important for the board to understand their roles and responsibilities, and the superintendent as well, but more specifically your authority and limits in your role as a board and as a superintendent. So that's why we're going to do everything I do has a purpose, I promise. And so that's why we're going to spend a little bit of time before I dive into the big topics for tonight in getting to know each other a little bit. And that includes getting to know me and getting to know what OSBA is. I know I met a lot of you at the convention. Thank you so much for coming to the OSBA annual convention at the Marriott in downtown Portland, waterfront. It was great to get to know a little bit of you. I was excited to come and join you tonight.
And so some of this might be repetitive, but I do know you also have a new board member that you just swore in tonight. So congratulations, new board member. And so at OSBA, really, Oregon School Boards Association, but OSBA for shorthand, we have a lot of different departments. I'm on the board development team. We have lawyers, we have policy team, we have a legislative team, we have a communications team. We have a lot of teams that are here to support you. We want to make sure our members are set up for success. And so really look to us as kind of your advisors. So like whether it's admin professionals, board secretary can call me, or a board member. It doesn't just have to be the chair. I sometimes get asked like, oh, I thought only the chair can reach out. No, any board member can reach out. If you have any questions, we are here to support you. And if I don't have the answer, then I can guide you to maybe a different department at OSBA that does. But we have a lot of great experts. That's what we're here for. We're here to support you and make sure that whatever question you have, we're able to give you guidance and support in that. So me, as part of the board development team, I have been there for 2 years, and November was actually 2 years. It was my first annual convention. Aside from being the board development specialist, I also am the program planner for all our events. So for our 2 events, which we have one in summer board and then our annual convention. So I'm in charge of selecting our keynote speakers. I'm in charge of selecting the program, what strands we're gonna have. So that's, and with my team, of course, it's all supportive, but I do have many hats, just like you do as well. I know board members, you also have many hats. You are elected officials, but you also are volunteer positions. And so I know that aside from being a board member, you may have other professional jobs, you may have other things. And so it's important, again, to get to know each other at that individual level and get to know me. And so I have been with OSBA for 2 years. Prior to OSBA, I worked with the Department of Health and Human Services with a unique partnership with United Way, a nonprofit around early learning initiative for early learning hubs. Some of you might know about Preschool Promise or have heard of it, or maybe it's here in your district. I worked a lot with that initiative when it was first starting out, and that's really where my passion for education policy work grew, and especially around equity work. I then left, went and got my master's, and then joined OSBA, and I'm here to, just like all of you, ensure that students, that all students get the best public education possible. And so, as I said, I'm on the board development team, and we really just want to support you with your board professional development. It's really important, I'm going to emphasize, to have continuous board professional development. I have done trainings, and this training and others with a lot of different boards, some that have been on boards for 10+ years, some who are new like yourself, some who maybe just started in a few days. And they always learn something new, because we are making sure at our team that we are continuously improving as well, giving you the latest research, best practices, and the tools that you need to be an effective functioning board. And so that's tonight with the transition program, really important to, oh, I'm losing connection. It dropped me.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. Sorry, let me pause here. I do have a jump drive if you want to just plug that in. Would that be easier? So we don't keep losing. Technical difficulties. The joint. And then I'll just show you that might be easy. Gotta go to the D drive.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, yep. Yep, that one. It's Woodburn. Should be on there. Oh no. This one? Oh, yes. I meant to create a folder, but I forgot.
That's all right.
And then you can just screen share from
You're
board development. And go from the beginning. You can hide that. And then make sure it's just a current slide. So go to the slideshow here. And then present from current view. There we go. So that way they don't see, so they see the bigger picture.
Now we have your notes though.
No, we.
Oh, no, you
Oh,
don't.
just kidding.
So let me exit out of here. This is tricky. Okay. All right, so sorry about that, the joys of technology. But so there's a lot of different areas the board development team works on. We're going to be focusing a lot on the superintendent evaluation, which is also a big part of the superintendent transition program. But there's a lot of other areas I'm going to be covering tonight, so bear with me. I know that you also met with Vince, my colleague, prior and did a retreat, and so there may be some repetitiveness, but I think it's also important to just do a refresher, a recap, especially for a new board member who I believe was not a part of that discussion with Vince. So and hopefully you'll learn something new that maybe, there's a lot of content. I don't expect, I always tell boards, you don't have to memorize all the policies and all the laws. There's a lot of things, and every year you're learning more and more. And I'm going to acknowledge that the past 2.5 years have brought its own challenges. And so that's why it's important to do continuous improvement. I may sound like a broken record, but it really is important. And we know too that we need to continuously improve as well. So it's not just the board that needs to continuously improve, we too at OSBA, and that's what we're doing. And that's what we do with our events and whatnot. So that's just me in a nutshell. I now want to get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to just go around the table and tell me your name, how long you've been a board member, what do you do when you're not doing board work? Again, I know you wear many different hats. So either both professionally and for fun. And then what is one thing, just one, that either excites you or challenges you about school board work? And so if we can just keep each to a minute or two. And Jenny, I would want you to participate as well, because you're an important part of the team, and then Joe as well. And then make sure our virtual board members as well. So do I have a brave volunteer?
I'll go ahead and start on this one, Andrea.
Great.
So Annabella Hernández.
Speak up, just for people at home.
Yes, Annabella Hernández Mejia, and I got appointed just a month ago. So I'm sworn today, that's how fresh I am. And what I do as far as professionally, I work with farm workers. I actually grew up farm worker family. I love community building, going out hiking. So really narrowing it or boiling it down to the simplest terms. I love learning new things, meeting new people, and also seeing new places. As far as what excites me, I know that I'm new and it's going to be some learning. I really like to take in what everybody else experiences as well. I know I bring in my own lens and my own experience. But that doesn't necessarily have to keep one from being able to be open and receptive to that of others, to try to, again, just grow. So that's part of what I'm here for.
Great, thank you. Melanie.
My name is Monique Legaspi. I've been on the board, I think, a couple of years. What do I do outside of board work? I'm a therapist, so I do private practice here in Winter. So I get to work with a lot of our students and families. And what do I do for fun? I have 2 kiddos, so really exposing them and exploring with them as the seasons come up and just doing them. So. And I think that challenges me. I think to always do my homework, to read. I feel like there's never a topic that I know enough about. And so just making sure that that I have access to those resources or people who are either experts on any topics that come up.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, good evening. Thank you for the keynotes. OSBA, they were so absolutely maravilloso, marvelous this year, well, every year, but this year is like fresh. Thank you for that. My name is Laura Isidria. I've been serving as a board member since October 2016 when I was appointed. Then I ran my campaign in 2017. What I do besides the board, I've been working in the community for almost 30 years. I did some work with the clinic, the local clinic. I'm a former farm worker, so when I started working at the clinic, my passion was to go back to the fields and find the people, right, that needed the resources. So I became one of the lay health promoters at the local clinic. And so, it was just a privilege to go back to the labor camps and work with families or single men or single women or moms. Then I became working for farm worker housing for 12 years, doing everything but the ED. Then in 2010, I became the interim director for Capaces Leadership Institute here in Woodbury. And I've been working in the social justice movement, just opening pathways for women like me, that we come from the fields and feeling like we will not be good in any other field of work, but working at the farm, path of farm worker. And just making the pathway for others like me, that somebody gave me the opportunity. And working in social justice is just being equitable, just trying to have that lens, of equity and bringing. Usually, we pay attention to the Chinese students or the Chinese workers, but we never pay attention to those that might be shy and shy away and be just the works of equity lens. That was something that I learned. What I do for fun, I love music. I love art. So I love music, singing, dancing. My husband has 2 left feet. So I do Zumba. So I love Upper Zumba, Land Zumba. I love dancing. So that's a break for him. The things that excite me is when I come to the meetings as having the community present, bringing community members either because they are worrying the students and the families, fill the room, or when we have specific groups that we go to. I really love to do outreach, so just getting in contact with the families is it's good because families don't know what we do, so they think we're part of the staff and that we get paid and we don't care and so on. So when they see us out there in the community, it makes a difference. So that's what excites me. And when I'm here is just to see. Making sure the equity lens is always on the table. That's the one. Sorry, I took more than a minute.
No, it's okay, thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and read Gustavo's. As you heard, his voice is
Yay.
just about terrible, so
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
be I'll do an interpretive dance. Gustavo Villa Moreno, 6 months on the board. He works for PAE, which is a consulting engineering firm that focuses on sustainability in buildings. He enjoys working on different projects, including the design of K-12 schools. For fun, he also likes to spend time with family, exploring the Pacific Northwest, and also traveling to other places. What excites him about school board work is making a difference for our students here and providing opportunities for students to find their purpose. He grew up in Woodburn, and serving the community through education is very rewarding for him.
Thank you, Gustavo. Sorry you're sick. Feel better.
I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that I work for the Ford Family Foundation. I'm a community builder. So doing the same thing I was doing here with the rest of the communities statewide. So I'm sorry.
No, that's really fun. Thank you.
Should we do Anthony next? And then you
Yeah,
can come
we can do
to
Anthony.
non-board members? Yeah.
Hey, Janet, and board. My name is Anthony Medina. I've been on the board for 5 years now. I've been on the board for 5 years. I currently serve as the senior policy analyst for all the public universities here in the state of Oregon. I work for the state of Oregon. Been doing that work also for 5 years. And yeah, started working in that space basically the same time I got elected in 2017. And for fun, I like to, a lot of the same stuff folks mentioned. I like to travel. What we're really into lately is trying new places to eat. My new favorite taco spot in town is the taco truck right in front of, it's right on I-90 across from, adjacent to Arc Circle. It's a yellow taco truck that just parked there in the abandoned lot in the corner. It's a new taco truck in town. It's really good. Anyways, that's my little plug. And for what excites me about board work is there's always something new. There's always a new challenge in the space and the work that we do. And that new challenge is always exciting.
Thank you.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah. Absolutely.
My name is Jenny Marquez. I've been serving in this role since July of 2013. So I'm now entering in my 10th school year in this role. Previous to that, I was at the high school for 7 years. So I've been with the district for quite a while. For fun, I really enjoy family time. I love to travel. I like going to sporting events. This year, my husband and I are part owners of Blazer season tickets. So we've been going to a lot of games. And then most recently, I'm a new mom, so I've been enjoying that too. And then what excites me with board work, to me, it's really, so two pieces of it. Really the community building of it. I grew up in a big city, and so coming to Woodburn and not just living and working here, I feel really connected and just love feeling a part of a community. I didn't get that as a child growing up in a big city. So that really excites me just to be a part of working and serving not just students that come to school here, but my neighbors in reality. And then the other piece that excites me specifically about board work is seeing the impact that board decisions make in classrooms. Today, Chrissy really touched on the SIA and adding art teachers into elementary schools. Last year we got invited, I don't know what they called the event, or maybe you can help me, but Nelly had an art event. And so they showcased the work that they've been doing. They didn't have an art teacher before prior to SIA. And so seeing the work that they have done now is really cool and exciting, just how prideful the kids are to actually have the opportunity to have art as a class is really cool to see. And that's not just thanks to our taxpayers, but also to the board and making those investments. So that really excites me.
I am in my 20th week here in Woodburn, in my 30th year as a professional educator. So it's been quite a ride so far. What I'm doing, I didn't realize that there was anything outside of work, so I don't know how to answer the second question. Currently, I'm trying to catch up on all the World Cup games that I don't get to see during the day, so I don't want to know what the scores are. But I do catch up quite a bit on that. And then there's something that excites me about just generally the work. I can't truly imagine doing anything else. My father was a teacher, so I was always around school since I was a little kid, before I even went to school myself. And so school has been part of my existence as far back as I can remember, even before that. So I think just for me, knowing the opportunities for impact on directly on the students that we have, on the staff that serve the students, and on the community at large, I think it's really, I feel very fortunate to get to have that opportunity to have the kind of impact that I think all of our students and families deserve. So really, it's every day is exciting. Some days are more exciting than others. But I think honestly, the work that we get to do is the most important work out there. And I just can't imagine anything else being even nearly as important as the work that schools and school districts and school staff and school boards do for their community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for your introductions. And again, the reason it's important to spend time on this is, as you learned, all of you have such wonderful different lived experiences, what you do for fun even. Sometimes you can build connections that way. Sometimes, it's important to understand, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. And you also have what I like to call commonly used policies that you should be commonly aware of. Like I said, there's a lot of policies and you don't have to memorize all of them, but there are some that you're constantly going to be referencing. And I'm going to talk more about that later today. But, it's important for boards to understand that you're going to have different opinions, different viewpoints, different lived experiences. And that's okay. You're individual board members, and that you should have different opinions, and you're going to have different, and that's why you have to deliberate and have discussions. But it's making sure that you have them in a healthy way, that you know how to manage conflict. We're going to talk about that as well. And understand that ultimately, whether you agree or disagree with a decision that gets made, you have to acknowledge the process of a quorum and then kind of support your board with that decision that's made. And we'll talk more about that. But that's really kind of just a snippet of why we're doing this and why I wanted to spend just a little bit of time getting to know you and a little bit of your background and kind of what else you do aside from being a board member, because you don't sometimes have that opportunity in your board meetings because you have a lot of items to go through. We're going to talk about that too. I'm curious to see how your board regular meetings go and how I can support in that area, in any area really, your operations, communications. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. I do just want to make sure that we set some norms and expectations for tonight's discussion. I'm going to be presenting and giving you some information, but I also am going to put you in pairs, and I want you to do a lot of reflecting tonight, because I can tell you best practices and I can give you all the guidance, but I want to hear from you first and get to know a sense of how things work for your board. And then I will provide kind of my analysis of what I hear and kind of how I can best support you, because every district is different. Every community that the district serves are different. I want to make sure that I am tailoring my guidance to your specific district. So that's why I'm going to ask you first to, reflect, and you're going to be thinking a lot tonight, and I'm going to put you to work. So that's what's called a work session. But so yeah, before that though, just any norms and expectations, just kind of popcorn style, like what do you have, what do you want to kind of have as expectations for, oh, you can skip that, sorry. We're not gonna have time to do the, the icebreaker activity.
Was that
There you go. So if you can just, what do you want to have as an expectation? I'll give you kind of an example that I've done with other boards, and they'll say, making sure everybody respects people's opinions. What would you want as kind of norms and expectations for because we're going to have a lot of discussion tonight about a lot of different topics and areas. Anything that you would want to have as a norm for expectation for tonight? Even as simple as I've had boards say, end on time. That can be an expectation too. And I promise you, I always try to end on time, because I know you're very busy, and my goal is not to run through all these slides. And I want to make sure that those discussions are organic and rich. And if we have a really deep discussion on one area, we're going to continue it and we can table the rest, because again, I'm here to support you, and I want to make sure that I address your questions and I can guide you to be effective functioning boards as best as possible, especially with your transition program and helping you set the tone for the relationship you're going to have with the superintendent and the work you do moving forward.
Thank you, Jenna. For me, it's important the respect one, but also along the lines that respect is that you speak your truth, your own truth. It's not somebody else's but yours. So that's what I will. That's how I will guide the expectations of everyone. In that discussion.
Would that be similar to like campaign?
Like you talk about your truth, your eye straightening instead of like, why hear from somebody else and then somebody else's truth, that my truth, my own
Observation, what you've experienced, not necessarily what you've heard from others.
Yeah.
Okay, you're wanting to hear from, okay. Anthony, please feel free to chime in as well. And I know Gustavo, if you want to put it in the chat, put it in.
I'll add, the screen, I don't know if it's the screen share or something. It's still on the, all I see is the blue circle spinning. So I don't know what slide y'all are on.
Oh, no, you're losing connection too. You might want to reshare. Make sure you're still connected.
Are you seeing a norms?
Okay, now I see it. Thank you.
The
Okay.
kitty cat. I couldn't find an image that was like, well, cats have different, behaviors and actions. Yeah, so feel free if there's anything else, but that's good. I mean, what you said, speak your own truth, and what you mean by that, Laura, is what you've seen, what you observed, not necessarily he said, she, like, things are they, things you've heard outside. Okay. Anything else? And if not, that's okay. We can also, sometimes when I do the trainings, I'll jump in and say, like, another example is, and we'll talk about it when we talk about running your meetings and kind of parliamentary procedure, is make the 2 times Robin, making sure everyone speaks. Everybody gets to speak before that person speaks again. That's something that is commonly used as a practice of parliamentary procedure, and that sometimes gets brought up. But again, I'm here, I'm your facilitator. I'll make sure to guide you throughout, and I'll chime in and be like, that's an expectation. That's a norm that we can add to the list. Okay, great.
I have a couple of more. I have like use your eyes statement, like one person, and the other one, and it was a very important one. Oh my goodness.
And that's okay. We can come back if you remember it. Like I said, something might pop up as we start to discuss and you actually get to put things in practice. Okay, I'm going to move us along just for the because of the time, and I want to make sure that you do end on time, and I also want to take breaks because I know 3 hours is a lot. So again, purpose of today, there's a couple things, but we're mostly going to be focusing on the superintendent transition program, and I'm going to do an overview. Oh, you can change the slide. I'm going to do an overview and kind of walk you through the requirements again of that and why you're doing this transition program. We're going to be talking a lot about standards, and this is really what I like to call, and these are balanced governance standards. They are research-based, and essentially these standards are kind of like the roles and responsibilities of the board. There's a lot of standards, there's 12, we're not going to go through all of them. I'm going to walk you through a few that I believe are foundational with the work of the transition program. So I want to tie everything back together, but it's important in order to work on your transition program that, again, you clearly understand your roles and responsibilities, your authority and limits, and to be able to set some clear expectations. And I'll explain more of that. And then we're going to end with just next steps, when our next session is going to do, and then if there are certain areas that we want to dive deeper into, we'll discuss that as well together as the board. So the transition program overview. There you go. So again, there's a couple areas for the transition program of kind of what's, why it's important to do it. It's part of the executive search, and if you complete it, there's a guarantee at the end. And so it's important to kind of walk through roles and responsibilities and set some clear expectations for how you're going to work together with the superintendent, how you're going to communicate. We call that board operating agreements, which again, you have an example of some samples, and I'll walk through them once we get to that area. But in order to set clear expectations, you need to really understand the roles and responsibilities. And so that's why I'm going to walk you through some foundational pieces. I'm not sure what Vince walked you through, and so if it's repetitive, let me know. But again, I'm going to be making you reflect. It's not going to be so much me talking, it's going to be more you and then me giving you some guidance. And then the step 3 is the superintendent evaluation system, making sure that you have a process set and ready to go so that when you do the evaluation in March, if that's when your deadline is, and we'll be walking through that as well and diving deeper into that section, making sure that you have all the steps and that you're ready to go so that you are set up for success when it comes to superintendent evaluation. And then step 4 Again, creating some, walking through your board operations and sometimes the communication protocols. When you're setting clear expectations, we oftentimes suggest having a board operating agreement and a superintendent board operating agreement so that you can agree to how you're going to communicate, how you're going to work together. It's really what the board operating agreements are essentially prioritizing things that are already in your policies, but you have a lot of different policies. And so it's prioritizing for you what is going to help you operate effectively and in a functioning manner. So, and maintaining that relationship with the board and the superintendent, which is what this transition program is all about. So this is just kind of a glimpse at the steps in the search process. You've already done all of them. You're at the last part where it says transition program there on the second to last paragraph. And basically after you do that, then you're kind of guaranteed, and that's why it's important to do to complete the transition program, which is 6 to 9 hours of training and covering those 4 bucket areas: roles and responsibilities, setting some clear expectations, creating a board operating agreement and a board superintendent operating agreement, and setting up a clear superintendent evaluation process. Because then you're guaranteed, if you complete those 6 to 9 hours with the search, if let's say your superintendent were to leave in the next 2 years for any reason, you're guaranteed to be supported in the search process again. So that's why it's kind of that's what's called a guarantee. And next slide, please. Sarah and Steve Kelly can definitely, you know, whoever was, I don't know who supported you, who helped you with your search. Both of them. So both of them would, I'm sure, walk you through that. And so this is just more so a recap and refresher of why it's important to complete those 6 to 9 hours. And typically they're done August, September, but that's okay. We're starting a little bit late, but no worries. You have a new board member, so sometimes things work out, and in this case, it's going to work out fine. But that's the transition program. So now I want to dive into roles and responsibilities, and the way I'm going to do that is by walking you through those foundational standards that again are evidence-based. But for boards, I like to categorize it into 3 big bucket areas. Essentially, you need to know that you impact student achievement, and we're going to be focusing really on how your board and superintendent relationship impacts student achievement as well. And then we're going to be focusing on board operations, and it's important for you to know, you know, your work is very complex. It is, but it's collaborative work. And we're going to talk more specifically of what that collaboration means, especially related to the board and the superintendent relationship. And then step 3 is that your work is constrained by a lot of laws and policies. We're going to walk through some policy scenarios tonight. I may not get to the law section, but it is important to, I don't know if Vince gave you basics public meetings law overview. Did he? Does that ring a bell? No worries. Well, either tonight if we have time, and if not, we'll move it to next time. But those are really kind of the big areas. And what my goal is to ensure that you have a clear idea of what your roles and responsibilities are, that you understand the importance of how you impact student achievement and how your relationship with the board and superintendent is really critical in having a healthy relationship with the board and superintendent, because that does impact student achievement ultimately. So my goal is for you, sometimes I talk to boards and we kind of have this saying that nobody knows what a board member does, and neither did you until you became a board member. And so that's why we do these trainings. And also not just the board, but sometimes the community. I heard one of you mention in your introductions that the community sometimes doesn't know what the board does. And I hear that a lot. You're not alone. There's a lot of communities that don't understand, and we're going to talk about communications with the community as well later tonight. But in the end, I hope that you have a clear path and you are clearly understand what your roles and responsibilities are, and you're able to make informed decisions and get the information you need in a very healthy way, have healthy debates and discussions, run your operations, your board meetings as effectively as possible so that you can impact student achievement. Because all your work is for all students. Next slide, please. Okay. So the standards that we're going to walk through, first, I just want to make it, again, I'm going to reiterate this, but your actions, your behaviors impact student achievement. I've seen it. I've seen it across the state. The research also shows it. Go to the next slide. And this is just a snapshot of kind of the extensive amount of research. How many of you have heard of the Lighthouse study? Yeah. So Lighthouse study is kind of where that research started, where it showed how board actions and behaviors have a correlation and an impact with student achievement. But since then, there's been a lot of different research. We've actually partnered with Tom Alsbury, who those are the standards I'm going to walk you through. They're called balanced governance standards. We've revamped our self-evaluation, which I'm going to show you a glimpse of. It used to be on 5 standards, now there's 12. And so we are, like I said, we are continuously improving our best practices. And so we want you to also have that information. Next slide. So these are the 12 standards from the Tom Alsbury, what are called balanced governance standards. We're not going to be covering all 12, but we're going to be covering a few of them, which I like to call foundational. So with that, we're going to discuss standard 7. Again, I'm going to be jumping around because I'm not going to be going in order. Culture and climate. So I'm going to put you in pairs, and Gustavo and Anthony, thank you, are going to be just can reflect on their own individually because you're online. But here I'm going to have you two pair up, and then Laura and Joe pair up. And this is where you're going to start to reflect and do some work. So culture and climate. In your pairs and individually online, Gustavo and Anthony, what do you think culture and climate means for the board? How would you describe your board culture and climate? And I'm going to ask you to share with the group, but discuss in your little pairs, and then I want you to share so you can identify somebody to report out. And I'll just give you about 3 to 5 minutes to discuss these 2 questions.
Yeah, I think working together on the board.
Okay, going like this, but I see this. Look straight.
Same way with the dad is like, yeah, and then she sees somebody really jealous. Yeah, you know, but I don't think it's up to the state.
Okay. Let's hear from all of you. Do I have a volunteer to start us off with just the first question? What do you think culture and climate means for the board?
So at least the way we were discussing culture, obviously the non-legacy events, the way the board kind of works together, the norms that get established. I know, Naomi also mentioned something about, spoken and unspoken, sometimes rules, which would go into the norms of how individuals and the board members get along and work together. For me, the way I was describing climate is more like sometimes the environment, external things that happen. And while you might not have control of some of these external actions, activities, environment, things that may be going on, you do have the ability to, for instance, put on a raincoat if you know it's raining outside. That's my way of describing that. Yeah.
Do you have anything additional to add that wasn't already said?
Yeah, so I think we also talked about, so the working together as a team, and you're right, the board, staying focused on the work of the board. Are we doing just the first question or the second one?
Just the first question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we're pretty close to that. And the cultures around working together, you work well or is like hot and cold, right? So it's not working. So that's your kind of your climate.
Yeah. Does Anthony, do you have anything to add that hasn't been said around what culture and climate means for the board?
Sorry. I was about to talk and then, yeah.
All on Zoom today.
And I think the points made already have been great. And just falling back on the importance of culture and climate, especially in the work that we do and how it affects students in our district.
Great. So what about the second question? How would you describe, if I asked you to describe it, the board culture and climate here for the Woodburn School District Board? How would you describe your climate and culture?
We can volunteer since we.
Sure.
second last
Yeah,
one.
you start first. This time.
So I think we talked about it not yet being a team because we have our newest member, but we didn't have somebody there before. I was hired with a group of 5 people and now we have 2 new people in those roles. And so I think there's still some time to be built and this kind of a session helps kind of put that together so we can start to go all the one direction. I think the other part of the strategic plan piece, which will fit into the board goals later on, will also help. There's a lot of work around those 2 things to do that. So I think actually, even though we're getting started a little bit later in November, it will work out better just because we have a full team.
Yeah.
We have some newer numbers and we can kind of stay focused on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I was just gonna say, for our board culture and climate, I think sometimes we butt heads, but for the most part, there's a lot of overlap in our shared goals and our mission and vision and how we envision our district moving forward. And I think that's important to highlight, 80%, 90%, 95%, 99%, however you want to describe it. We are student focused, especially in the work that we do and the mission of moving the district forward.
And I think for me, my experience of board culture and climate, I think of it as, you know, what our dynamic looks like as a board. Is it healthy? Is it not? What are our strengths and what isn't? And what are our gaps? So I often ask, you know, are we a functioning board? And so I think for me at least, I don't know that I have an answer to that. And hopefully this will help us find out if we are or not, and how to improve that. I think also, I think of, you know, internally and externally, how either current events or what's happening in our community, and how we respond to that, to our community. I'm okay with not agreeing or either agreeing with others, but I think also the question of resolved and unresolved, either questions or issues that come up, either from here or the community, and they just kind of either get swept under the rug or are set aside. And so to me, in order to move the mission forward, like, we have to be a healthy board. And I think we really need to be self-reflective individually and as a team, so that we are able to set like a strong foundation. Otherwise, we can't move forward.
Yeah. And so thank you everyone for sharing. And so before I move on to the next slide, you know, sometimes I get asked, like, well, how do you know? Kind of what you're asking, right? Like, how do you know if you're a high functioning board? And so these standards prove that if you can do these effectively, if you're effective in all these 12 standards, you're a high functioning board. But how do you know that? And so there's a couple of ways, and I'm going to be mentioning it later tonight when I talk about standard around accountability, but I'm also going to be jumping around because I'm going to, you know, I can wait till that slide, but I want to jump in right now because you asked that question. I think it's good timing. So it's important for the board to hold themselves accountable and to hold themselves to know if they are, you know, how are they functioning? How is it working and not working? And that's what we call a board self-evaluation. I don't know when's the last time that your board did a board self-evaluation, and that's something we can talk about. That's what the tool I was talking about earlier that we revamped, that used to be on 5 standards, but we heard from our members that there was some missing. Like, we used to not have community engagement be a standard. It's a standard now. Cultural responsiveness was not a standard. It's a standard now. So a board self-evaluation is really important because you take the survey individually, the board. Superintendent can also be a part of it. That's up to the board to decide, but definitely the board has to take it. It's done anonymously. I myself won't even know the results because you self-identify when you take the survey with a unique identifier. So whether that's the color purple, whatever you want to self-identify as. So when I get the results, I don't know your results either. It's all anonymous, but you get to really go through all of the 12 standards. There's a lot of questions. It's a total of 84 questions. And it's really helpful. It helps boards. And then you take it individually, but then you have a facilitated discussion with us at OSBA. We decide to do it. It's a separate service. And we walk you through, because we know that sometimes, you know, the way either a question is read, what's really going to be valuable, and what I've heard from boards, is the facilitated discussion, where I do an analysis, or whoever on board development team will do an analysis of your results and show you the areas where there was a lot of agreement and then areas where there was a lot of disagreement. And the reason for that is because then you have really honest, transparent conversation around those areas that there's disagreement. Why is it that 2 people think that you're doing wonderful because it's based on a scale, and you say, you know, oh, we're excelling in this area. But then you see on the other spectrum where there's like 3 people who are saying, no, we're nowhere near excelling. And that's kind of the conversation that we have. And we in that facilitated discussion, we come up with what are the areas of the board's strengths and what are the areas of growth for the board, and come up with a professional development plan to address those areas of improvement or those areas of growth that are needed. But it's done together with the board. And sometimes folks will say, that was me, I'm the outlier in there, and it's up to them, because again, this is done anonymously. But the best way to get results from it in that facilitated discussion is to make sure that, you know, it's facilitated, so that way we can help guide the discussion and help you come to what's happening here. And that's why we focus on areas of agreement and areas of disagreement based on the results. And I'll show you a snapshot here later tonight of what that looks like. But we found that the tool is pretty valuable. I've done it a lot of times now, a lot of different boards, and they really enjoy the facilitated discussion, and they can talk about like, oh, I didn't realize that's what that question was asking, or, oh, like, I think we're doing X, Y, and Z, or I'm a new board member, so I answered, you know, I don't know, I'm still learning, right? And that will show in the results.
So for that, we would wait until to do that.
Not necessarily. I mean, that's something that we can, I would, as I'm discussing areas, jot down maybe on a piece of paper, like anything that you feel you want to potentially explore further. And we can talk about that at the end of tonight, next steps, or next time that we meet too, and see kind of what is it that is going to help your board. And that's why I wanted to cover roles and responsibilities a little bit with you, and more specifically these standards, because they are, they'll help you kind of reflect and analyze kind of what is it that our board needs. And so it sounds like, I don't know when's the last time you did a self-evaluation. Have you done a board self-evaluation? Yeah.
But I don't
In the
know that-
spring.
No, I think it's been a few years.
No, it's been a few years.
It's been a few years. So we typically recommend,
But I don't think we did like.
Yeah, we only did like the free one that OSB offered, and we didn't do the in-depth.
the
That's what it
facilitated
was, yeah.
discussion. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's, we recommend at least doing it every other year. And then especially when there's new board members, there's really not a right or wrong time to do it. I've had boards ask me, you know, oh, we just got a new board member. And I was like, it's also a good opportunity. I think it's okay if you have new board members to do it. It's really just based on your needs. And it sounds to me like if you really want to know, and to kind of address your specific question about like, how do we know if we're high functioning? That's one way to start to kind of identify your areas of strength. As a board, it's really important to also focus on your areas of strength, because you want to maintain those areas of strength. But then also on the flip side, what are your areas of growth? Where is that disalignment in terms of how you're functioning as a board? And so that's where that tool can become really useful and helpful. And then we can create a plan together for how you're going to address that, and make sure, you know, you plan it out throughout the year so you don't get overwhelmed, and you kind of align it with like your work sessions or whatnot. Good question. So really the reason why I started with this, and some of you addressed it, is if you don't have a positive culture and climate, then you're not going to be able to, you know, the next slide, to work together effectively. And really your work is collaborative. This is a definition that we created, board development team, over an amount of research. And essentially what it's saying, and I'll have you kind of just read that on your own, is that you cannot collaborate and have effective partnerships with each other as individual board members, with the superintendent, and even with the community, if there isn't trust and respect. There needs to be that culture and climate of trust and respect, a positive environment. It's okay to have different opinions, and I'm not saying you should all need to agree all the time. And some of you say, you know, sometimes we don't agree, but we are focused, and that's important too. And so I'm glad to hear that you're focused on all students, your mission, your vision is all the same. That's a key part to also having a good culture and climate. But a lot of it too is maintaining that trust and respect, and that's why we spend time with roles and responsibilities, so that you don't feel like you don't know what your role is, or when you can speak and when you can't, or when you can reach out to Joe for X, Y, and Z. So that's, you know, and then the shared focus, which you all, it sounds like you all have that, so that's great. But making sure, you know, you also have that trust and respect with each other, and build on those relationships. And that's all through collective responsibility, accountability, and support. And kind of what I just said, making sure you're not just holding the superintendent accountable, which is the superintendent evaluation that we're going to talk about in terms of the transition program, but also the board holding themselves accountable in their performance with the board self-evaluation. You know, some of you mentioned, you know, what does culture and climate mean? It's really how you work together, how you have conversations, even your body language during meetings, how you deliberate and have discussions on certain topics. That's really kind of what it is. It's your behaviors and your actions. Go to the next slide, please. And it's really also kind of how you handle and manage conflict. And conflict isn't bad, it's just how you manage it. Because again, you're individuals, you're gonna have different opinions, different perspectives. You're gonna be possibly talking to you're talking to your community, and you're getting information that way, and you're hearing things. And maybe some of you have students at the district. I don't know. There's lots of different avenues and ways that you're gathering information. And so it's just kind of how you manage your conflict when as a board. And when you're sometimes if you have heated debates and discussions, which sometimes occurs, I've seen it. It's just important that you know how to manage that. Next slide. And also how you run your meetings. Are you having marathon meetings? Are you having actually did a training with the board, and instead of a marathon meeting where they're meeting for hours and hours, they have sprinter meetings. That was the first for me. They said they finished their meetings in 30 minutes. I was like, wait, what? You have sprinting meetings, not marathon meetings. But it is important that how you run your meetings. You know, do you feel like you're prepared for your meetings? Do you feel like the items on the agendas are items that you should be discussing? And you know, do you feel there's something missing, or you don't have information when you come to your meetings, et cetera? So my next set of questions in terms of running meetings, how do you communicate with the superintendent? I'm just gonna have you reflect individually and not in your pairs. How do you communicate with the superintendent? And then Anthony and Gustavo, please feel free. Please feel free to chime in as well. And definitely reflect on this question too. I'm just gonna give you one more minute.
For me, it's been very different with different superintendents. So for some of the superintendents that I did with during my time here, some of them was in person. Some of the other some other ways of communicate was email, phone calls. So those are the three. I don't know if you're asking like a way to communicate, like a model, or you're just asking like if we're doing in person or phone calls, or.
I mean, either. So how do you stay informed of, like, you know, do you feel like you can just, I'm just curious how you just communicate. I'll give you an example. Some districts, the superintendent, please also feel free to chime in. We'll have some superintendents will have cafe chats with their boards to get to know them at the individual level. And so I'm just curious kind of how you communicate. Do you feel you can just reach out to Joe? Do you know when you can reach out to Joe? Like, how do you get information if you need it?
Yeah. And with previous superintendents, it's just a phone call away. Yeah. We stop by at the office and somebody is available, Jenny or the superintendent, we can have a time with the superintendent to communicate. I haven't had a conversation with Joe, like one-on-one with un cafecito or something like that, but usually that's what we do, you know, a cafecito with the superintendent, and we go over suggestions or whatever it's that suggestions that we might have, or topics or subjects that we might want to bring up to the board. Usually the chair is the president is the one that meets with the superintendent more often than us, but it used to be accustomed to have like a cafecito every month or I suppose.
So, thank you. Anybody else, anything in addition to share that is there, how do you communicate with the superintendent? Or even in the past, because I know that your superintendent has
Yes.
only had 20 weeks. So this isn't just currently, I'm just saying,
Yes.
even in the past, because in the past too is really important. Because next time I'm gonna have you do an activity and I want you to set some clear expectations around that. So that's why I'm asking. So this is just free discussion, no right or wrong answers. So given in the past or right now present, how do you communicate with the superintendent? How do you stay informed?
I think speaking about the past, I feel like there was something already established, like I think, at least for me, like I knew that the superintendent at those times reached out either monthly or every other month. At the time it was like via Zoom or in person. When things happen in the district, there was always communication, either a text or email, or just a heads up. And that felt like I was in the know, like I knew what was going on. I think now there is an email that we receive, and then there's also like maybe 2 emails. One that gets sent to staff, and so we have access to that. But as far as if you ask me, what does it look like now?
And that's okay, because again, that's what the transition program is about, is to make sure that, in the past, sounds like you've had this relationship and you already knew, the expectations were already set. And so you already knew what to expect, and you already knew that if something's happening, you were gonna get informed. And so we want to make sure that you set some expectations. That's really what the transition program is for, is setting those kind of expectations and setting you up, setting up the tone to maintain that and to start that. And it's sometimes not going to be done. It's not going to be done overnight, but it's important to have those conversations and for Joe to hear too, kind of what's maybe worked or not worked in the past and how, you can start to develop that relationship and those expectations of how to communicate effectively. Anything from Anthony?
I have something from Gustavo.
Oh, yes. What does Gustavo say?
Sorry, Gustavo. For some reason, when I'm sharing screen during the webinar, I don't see the chat, but he even
Okay.
wrote in as far as culture and climate too.
Work collectively, yeah. We got that. Awesome. It says currently culture and climate is an area to grow in. Okay. Fairly new board, which is what we heard. Yep. Yep. The vision. Years on. Yep. And as the board chair, we try to meet bi-weekly over lunch or coffee. These meetings work well to stay up to date and follow up on items that are in the works. Joe is responsive to feedback and shares thoughts openly. I'd say we have a good system in place for the superintendent, as far as the superintendent and chair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that is true. And so like another question or just that I'll just kind of ask, and some of you already touched on this, the reason why you want to set those clear expectations, because again, this is what this is all about, is to make sure that together, you with the board and the superintendent know kind of what the expectations are when it comes to communications and staying informed. It is important for the board though to understand that sometimes we want to make sure there's no surprises. And so an example I give is like, if there's rumblings, but making sure that it does fall under the purview of the board. Because there are times that there are things that are going to be happening at the district that the board doesn't necessarily need to be aware of. And so that's something that you need to discuss together with Joe and understand that he's not trying to leave you in the dark. It's just that there are certain things because of privacy concerns, HIPAA rules, you name it, there are certain things that he won't be able to give you all the details. Now, if it's something that pertains to the board and the board needs to be aware of it because it's a big kind of issue, it's something that's coming up, and you don't want to be caught off guard if, let's say, a community approaches you and you're like, I didn't know that's happening. You don't want to look, you don't want to be caught off guard, but neither does the superintendent either. If you hear something from the community as a board member, making sure that Joe is aware of it just as an FYI. He might already be aware of it, but you don't want to make that assumption. So that's where it's important together that you establish those expectations of like, if I, as a board member, I'm out in the community, and somebody approaches me about X, Y, and Z, letting Joe know so that maybe he'll say, yep, was aware of it. Thank you so much. It's in the process or whatnot. And if he doesn't, he'll, be like, thank you so much for raising it. I'll keep an eye on that. And vice versa. If there's rumblings there's something happening big at the district that falls under the purview of the board, Joe letting you know, either via, depending on the urgency, either via an email or sometimes, sometimes a text. You do want to be careful though with texting and even emails that you as a board don't hit reply all ever, because you want to make sure that you don't start discussing in a thread, whether that's an email or a text, deliberating and discussing board business. So
Can we pause there for 1 second?
Yeah.
So that is why I will always send you individual texts, and at the bottom of it, I will tell you that I'm sending the text to all board members. So when you get that text,
Beautiful.
so you get them individually, and they always come back to only me. With email, I'll usually send them to myself, and then I will BCC all of you, but I'll tell you that's what I'm doing.
Great.
That way, when you reply, the reply only comes back to me. Sometimes it'll be that I'll CC Gustavo as board chair. But that's why you won't see all of your names all in one email that way, because I don't want you to respond to those. And that's even for simple social things. That it's a general habit. I try not to CC you all, so you don't get in a problem of doing a chain meeting by replying all, even if you were just talking about something, to try to keep you out of that. So I will almost always do it that way. With texts, it's always individual. And I only send text when it's something that is a big emergency kind of a thing that you absolutely need to know about. So
Beautiful. I like that you said that. You said there's a disclaimer that says it's been sent to all.
I want everybody, board members to know that I'm
That's
sending this right.
That's great. I hadn't heard that one. That's a nice best practice. Because exactly, you don't want to make sure, but you want to make sure that they're staying informed. And so it sounds like you have a process already in place. And now,
Well, they may not have known that was a process. I just
well, that's
took
what
the
this is
opportunity
for.
you were saying.
That's what this
Yeah,
is for, so
that
that you
is-
can now you know, oh, I didn't realize maybe there's a disclaimer at the bottom. So now you know that that's Joe's kind of process, and if that works or doesn't work, we can discuss that right now. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
That's
it's just to
exactly.
stay away from the chain meeting and the,
Yeah, it's to stay
multiple
away
stuff.
from not following public meetings law.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have an illegal meeting. And so that's what that means. If you start discussing as a quorum, and that can happen unintentionally via text, via even social media channels too, like Facebook, if you start engaging and it's done unintentionally, and it can just, if more than if 3 of you start engaging in something, that's a quorum. That's an illegal meeting. So I guess I'll just ask, and we can dive deeper next time, because I'll actually have you work through a board operating agreement. This is just some samples. Typically, I recommend it be 1 page. And so I'm gonna keep asking a couple more questions, and then we'll leave this actual activity for next time. So the next question I have is, how do you communicate with the community, with student, parents, and staff? Get no right or wrong answers. Let's go in your pairs this time, and then Gustavo and Anthony, you can just reflect on your own, and I'll give you a couple minutes.
Like, how do we yes?
Yeah, or do you communicate with students, parents, and staff?
Then you want me to go there? Yeah.
oh, are we discussing again?
You don't
Yeah.
care.
All right, parents again?
Yep.
Watch the TV.
So this is the board and not the school. So sorry, as board, not as the board.
Yes.
Or as like the school district.
As the board. So how do you as the board communicate with students, parents, staff, or how do you stay informed with the community and what's happening with staff and students?
So as a board or as a board member?
As a,
I think that's what your question is. Yeah.
let's do both, as a board and as a board member. That's a good question, because that can also create some,
Right.
some other, yep.
Because that's the board, we do communicate, strategic plan, right?
Right, do you think when But outside of that.
Oh, it's
No,
hidden.
now I see it here,
Yeah,
but early.
it gets hidden, yeah. Oh, weird. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
glitching out
really
on me
messy.
too. I know from sometimes when I have two screens, that gets hidden down there and I'm like, where did it go? And so what I do is sometimes minimize it and then it pops up.
I think what it was doing,
No.
it was going over there.
Yes,
And I was missing also.
there you go. Now you have it.
But usually it would pop up and now it's not.
Oh, that's so weird.
See, like right now, you're not able to see it. It's on the screen.
Cool, perfect. Yay, perfect that he's using the chat. And then you know to save the chat, right? That's all public record.
I don't know if I do
I think it'll be okay too, because we have,
that. I'm recording.
oh, you're recording it, so it should probably save it, but there's a way to do it so you can save the script just to have it as record, but since we're reading out loud, his chat should probably be okay.
Okay.
But yeah, typically, I know it's the virtual thing.
Okay.
Moving forward, if you utilize the chat. Right now, again, for reading it out loud, it's fine, but if you do utilize it in the future, I don't know. if
Typically we don't.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
Is it cold in here?
Es the reflect of la bufanda de the reflection I guess. Bluish, purplish. Oh, está al lado.
Okay,
No, confidence.
Deberíamos de ver ustedes las cobijas que nos dio Pace allá en la OSDA, right? Yeah, Pace, I don't remember his name. He's always-
Dave.
Dave, he's always talking to me. He's like, oh, look what I have, this is new. new product." And I was like, I'm always
They have
cold.
good eyeglass things. Good ones. I didn't see the blanks, so.
I can see the they probably ran out
Well,
super
he
quick.
told me what he had new this time, so I don't know if it was the last one.
Okay, who wants to share? Do we want to start maybe the virtual
Yeah.
this time? Let's switch it up a little bit.
I can read you Gustavo's comment.
Perfect.
As a board, I'm not sure we have something in place for communication to the community. As a board member, it is through attending school events and meeting with community members when they reach out.
And I can kind of give a before COVID, we had events we would go to more frequently as a board, and we would like table at them, for example, and talk to folks about the district. We would share information about our strategic plan, etc. And then during COVID, I mean, everything kind of everything changed, right? And so as a board member, and then I was chair at the time too, so this has just been my experience, but as a board member, I fell back on the district. There was a lot of communication going out to families and to the community, and so I didn't want to be like an additional messenger out there. And there was a lot of very important information going out, especially related to COVID, hybrid, online learning, etc. So I fell back and fell back onto the district in providing that communication. But I think it just looks different. It looks different for everyone. And then kind of echoing Gustavo's comment, we don't have like a set process. But going back and reflecting to pre-COVID, one of the ways we were intentional about reaching out to the community was through tabling at community events.
Thank you. Anybody have anything additional to add that wasn't already said?
I just wonder how, he said the strategic plan in there, that was one way that the board communicates to the community what the goals for district are as a board. No, but I think individually is more either at their work or in the public. You can't go to the market without somebody stopping you to tell you something or ask you something, and other gatherings and things. And of course, sometimes you get individual emails or calls from people that email you. But,
So just to piggyback off that, when there is a community inquiry, do you get some through email? Like Jenny, does that ever come through an email? Is there a process for how to respond to the community? Do you have a process in place for that?
We as an individual, we don't respond. We send all the information to Jenny, and Jenny and the superintendent can, we never respond.
Yep, great.
I think occasionally they'll get communication if it's not public comment and it just gets forwarded to everyone. But typically it's been public comment that it comes from community.
Oh, okay. There's not like individual, and I know,
Yeah.
you know, especially with, you know, during the pandemic and COVID, some districts got a lot of inquiries via email. And so that's why I just wanted to just quickly ask, as we're talking about communication and emails, if you have a process. And we always just say, set up your system before you need it. And typically that is what we would recommend, is that the emails either go to just like you, the board secretary, and it gets, you know, sent to the superintendent, because most of the time, and the chair can be CC'd, most of the time it's going to be something that falls under the district's purview, under the superintendent's purview, and not the board. If it does fall under the board, that's why it's important to something, you know, to have the superintendent and the chair. You can discuss during their planning of agendas, like, this came through, this is something that the whole board needs to be, you know, this needs to be a discussion item, and you as the superintendent and the chair can decide that. But that's typically how we kind of do recommend it, and it sounds like that's kind of the process you have as well. Okay. This team over here, this group, prepare. What did you discuss? Is there anything?
Most of the team as far as, obviously, I'm new, and I'm assuming I'm gonna, like, communication and working with communities. I don't really know how to say, but, I think we normally share that if there is maybe something that will be foremost, sometimes the chair might be the one who writes, and it comes under his, but that's only if it's a bigger thing. I don't know if you have an example on me,
I don't know. I mean, at least for me, like when I get emails, I always follow them. And I always follow up because I believe that there should be some sort of response to whoever's asking. So it's usually I have a Facebook page for my for school board, and so I use that to communicate to parents and the community what's going on. So any events or share, or even for me, sometimes they don't know what we do. So I will just post, like, I checked in at this event and, you know, this is why I'm here. So just letting them know, like, what I'm doing as a board member, but also what the school district is doing. So I'll share newsletters, I share, what else? The agenda. So I can write a link for that so that they have
just like information. It's just kind of another way to just let you know. So typically when I do these trainings, I tell boards that, or when I get inquiries myself, like, hey, we have a situation, I ask, what does your policy say? Because a lot of times your policy will have some of this laid out for you. So in your packet, if you go, it's an alphabetical order. So if you go to policy BG, you have a policy around board staff communication. Sometimes there's one for community. I didn't see it in your community relations section of your policies, but I'll have to dive deeper and see if you do. Sometimes there's also even a policy around communications with community, but you do have one for how staff communication happens. And so the first sentence says that the basic line of communication, the board desires to maintain open channels of communication between itself and the staff. The basic line of communication will, however, be through the superintendent. So your communication is through the superintendent when it comes to the staff. Staff communications to the board. Obviously staff is also a community member, so they're welcome to also come to public comment and do that. But when it comes to more formal kind of inquiries that staff has to the board or vice versa, that's going to be through the line of the superintendent. Superintendent is that line of communication, and that's set in your policy. And similar with visit to schools too, the board members can, if they're going to make a formal visit, need to inform the superintendent. So that way superintendent can let the teachers know, if you're going to observe a classroom or you're observing a program that just got, maybe implemented and the board wants to see it, or you name it, making sure that the superintendent is aware of that when you're doing a formal visit, so that the teachers and staff and students, can be notified and don't catch anyone off guard. Again, nobody likes surprises. I did get asked once from a board, what if we're a parent and we need to go to a parent-teacher conference? That is different. That is not a formal visit. That is your personal, and that's sometimes where wearing many hats, and sometimes it's not always black and white. And so it's okay to ask. But, that board member still just let the superintendent know. They knew that it was the personal matter, but just also based on kind of what was happening at the district at that time, they just let the superintendent know as an FYI. But you don't have to for a personal matter like that. But for a formal, as your policy states, visit to schools, you need to, let the superintendent know.
So what's an unofficial board?
An official board visit, kind of what I kind of like said right now, like if you're just going to go in to visit, if you're going for a parent teacher conference, or an unofficial visit could be if you're just stopping by, you're just going to table, kind of like what you said earlier. Some of you sometimes attended events. I would consider that an unofficial visit. If you're going there for an event, or you're going to a game, or you're going to, that's kind of an unofficial visit. Official visit is more if you're going there with a purpose, with a board, kind of with the board decided that we're going to do, and that has to be approved by the board, by the way. If you're going to do an official visit, you have to discuss and figure out together with the superintendent, that you want to go observe a classroom or something that pertains to the purview of the board. But again, it's in your policy. We're going to be walking through your public comment policy around community engagement, because that is a form. It's not the best. We'll talk more about that because public comment isn't necessarily engagement, and we'll talk more about that when we get there. It is 7:43. I know we're here until 8:45. How are you feeling? Do you want to take a quick break, 5 to 7 minutes, or you want to power through? How is everyone feeling?
I'm just gonna go through my notes again. But,
Take
I'm okay.
take 5 minutes.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Yeah, and that way I can also take a 5-minute break. I know. Yeah, that's funny.
Al contrario de mí, ayer María ganaron.
We'll have one small business item. Done.
Nice.
Should we? Shall we?
Yeah, power through it. So can you hit the, make sure we're
Yeah.
back in session.
Yes.
We're back.
Yeah.
Can you put the next? All right.
Where am I? How come I can't see that over here?
Let's go back to PowerPoint.
All right. So the next question is, do you feel prepared for meetings? I.e., do you, feel that you are prepared to discuss, ask questions, take action on agenda items? Pairs, and then Anthony and Gustavo can individually reflect.
Can you share the prompt on the screen?
Oh,
We have to unshare.
yeah, it does that. It looks like free. One.
Yes. Did that work, Anthony?
Now go back to current. Yeah, there you go.
I see a prompt, yeah, but yeah, I see it. The last one, do you feel prepared? Yep.
Yep. Okay. Let's start over here this time.
So is this like a board or anything?
Both, but let's do individually. Do you individually?
I mean, I think as a board member, I do feel most often prepared for meetings. I read the agenda, I review it, I know something will come up, I have something that knows. I think for me, it's really important to know what's going on in the agenda and what's being presented, so that I can ask questions needed. And so there are times that I may not understand something, but then I feel like I reach out. Sometimes, and this is just speaking with my experience, sometimes I feel like we sometimes just rubber stamp stuff or just move it along. So I don't know if we have, if we are prepared to discuss and ask questions as before.
Okay. Well, this group, anything to add to what was just said?
No, the stuff's in the agenda, you know, in the packet. Sometimes if there's a question, but you know, we haven't gone through difficult things, you know, the big ones like the CTE, high school 2.0, dress code, gender neutral bathrooms, all the ones that require a lot of discussion. Things like that. We haven't had any of those major ones yet come up.
Okay.
And we haven't done a lot of policy work yet this year, so. And then things that can play on that, of course, are the climate and culture around the board. So meetings can be easier or harder depending upon what that looks like.
Anthony and Gustavo?
Let's see, there's something in the chat. Gustavo mentions most of the time there's a lot to learn as a new board member and can take time to understand the reports and get to know the school district as an organization.
Anthony? Do you have anything to add that hasn't been said?
I do not.
All right, so I have, go to the next slide. I took a little glance at one of your agendas. And I wanted to just kind of walk through it and kind of show you mirrored what we suggest as an order for an agenda. And you pretty much have everything that's on there, so that's great. One that was missing here is, you know, adoption of the agenda, which you also did at the beginning tonight, and you have it there, so great. Your public comment, reports. I want to talk a little bit about this section right here, the reports. What does that look like? Do you feel like that's an area that when I work with boards that sometimes can be a lot, and so we want to make sure that those reports are tied to the strategic plan, are tied to, more specifically when it comes, and we're going to talk about that later, in terms of the role of the board when it comes to the strategic plan, and more so the strategic direction, because the board, though, you need to ensure that there are district goals, which I've seen yours already, and you kind of set the direction for where you want the district to go. And that's what we call the board sitting at that high level, overarching, overseeing. Once those goals are created, the superintendent with the strategic plan creates how it's going to get done. And that's either with strategies, measurable goals, and outcomes. And so are you, or in the past, because I know you're working on your strategic plan, is that what I heard? Yes. So, which is good, because I'm going to give you some best practices around that. So in the past, you know, and right now, what are those reports look like? Are they tied to your strategic goals that you as a board created? I know I've seen them, you have them posted on your website, your mission, vision, values, and then you have your goals. What are those? Do you feel like those are being done effectively? Do you feel like you're getting the information? Because sometimes what I've observed, and I saw you had a lot of reports in your meeting, there are some reports that maybe the board doesn't need to or just maybe needs a glance at it, or maybe doesn't need a deep dive or discussion. So like, do you have discussions in each of those reports, or is it just informative? How is it tied to the strategic goals? This is just a question, a right or wrong answer. I'm just here to, again, guide you, and I want to make sure that you are utilizing your time as effectively as possible.
I think for me, sometimes adjusting it, there can be a lot of work. And for me personally, I like to go through each one of those. I do find them informative. I feel like there's a lot of positive things, which is great. But I think for me as a board member, I would like to know what's the challenge and what is it that happens.
Anyone else?
I just joined, but there were times I have observed meetings. Most of the reports seem like they've been more informative, more than it is to create and have discussion among the board members. If anything, maybe they'll ask a question here and there, but I think most of the reports, at least from the ones I've experienced as a community member, have been more on the informative side.
Yeah, generally they're in response to board member questions. And so we'll come try to, if they come forward with questions and then we try to make sure that at least each department, that one looks very heavy. So I can barely see it from here, but we had several.
Maybe I literally just picked one.
Picked I think
It's a
the
good
heaviest
one.
one ever.
It's the largest
Yeah,
one.
I'm not even sure we've had that kind of a thing.
Okay, okay.
but that's-
It's not a common-
Yes,
it's not a common thing. Okay, that's
Right.
good.
no, that would be brutal.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, great. So that's good.
More common would be one or maybe two, depending upon what's coming together.
Perfect.
So like tonight, that was a required one that we're required, the SIA plan has
Yes.
to go in front of the board before
For sure.
December 1 or something, so that was, we had a special complaint.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, we try to do them with questions that come up in other discussions, and so
okay.
sometimes we're like, well, we're gonna talk about that in other departments, and then we make sure that they will highlight those questions that the board members.
For sure. And what we recommend once the strategic plan is done is that during your regular board meeting, that you as a superintendent give updates, periodic updates of the strategic plan, and not necessarily the entire strategic plan, because there's not going to be updates on all the plan. You're going to be working on different parts, and you as a superintendent with your team that's working on all that get to decide what to kind of just give an update to the board, and that's just informative.
Yeah.
But then there's also the monitoring piece where we want the board to have work sessions that are more collaborative. And that's a time where you can have a deep dive and discussion. Because I've had boards tell me like, well, I feel like we don't have time to discuss during board meetings, but you have work sessions. And making sure that those work sessions though are specific and tied again to your overall role as a board, which is to ensure that those strategic direction that you set or the goals are being met. So it's not the strategic plan. It's not you making sure the strategic plan is being met, although sometimes we'll get maybe updates. You're going to be getting updates on the strategic plan. So just so you know, things are in motion and just informative. But the monitoring piece, that's more so you as a board can make sure that the big overarching district goals. And that's what we mean when we talk about boards being high systems thinking level. And that's sometimes where it can get a little, it's not always black and white. And it can be sometimes a bit confusing in understanding the role of the board being at that high level role, which we call governance versus management, which is the more detailed stuff, which is the superintendent, which is why you, Joe, would do the how that all gets done. But that's usually what we recommend in terms of reports. And so that's why I guess I picked a big one, but it's still important to know, and especially new board members too. And I'm glad you're chiming in because it's also good to get your perspective as a new board member on what's working and what's not working, and making sure that, you know, I provide you the guidance, and you can ask me questions right now too as well.
Gustavo added in the chat, this is an area that we noticed needed some improvement in terms of organization and effectiveness of reports. We did provide some direction on keeping them clear and concise.
Great. So that's an example of setting a clear expectation. And sometimes that can be a part of a board operating agreement. Sometimes it doesn't have to be, but I do have some boards that sometimes will put in here, we will not have marathon meetings, and be more specific in terms of like how you get reports. Great. I just want to spend a little bit of time on that. So, I mentioned earlier, in terms of board culture and climate, go to the next slide. Sometimes there may be contentiousness, and I know I heard that, we haven't really had big discussions, but that doesn't mean that you may not in the future. And so I want to make sure I set you up again for success and you're ready and you have your systems in place before you need it. Because sometimes I will have boards just reach out to me when they need it. And we want to make sure we're proactive and giving you the tools and resources so that you're ready in case this does occur in your boardroom. And again, conflict isn't bad. I don't want you to think that conflict is bad. It's just how you manage it. And how you have those deliberations and discussions, because you should be deliberating. You're a board and you're voting on, on policies, on certain matters. And sometimes the contentiousness can be with the board of superintendent. Sometimes it can be with you as individual board members. I heard somebody say butt heads. So here's an illustration of, the deers there butting heads. Sometimes it can be with the community. And so I just want to walk through a couple scenarios addressing sometimes what that may look like when it's a board and superintendent contentiousness, when it's a board to a board or the board to community. And I'm going to put you in those pairs again. And so if we can go to the first scenario. And I want you to, I'm going to read this scenario and then in your pairs, no, actually, I'll just let you read it to yourselves. But in your pairs, just kind of read this and kind of assess what you see right or wrong in the scenario, how you would handle it. Just kind of brainstorm with your little pair, and then I'll give you best practices around it. So the first one is around contentiousness with the board and superintendent. And this you saw probably in the news. And so it is a little outdated now, but it's still, I think, a really good example. And you could honestly replace this with anything. Doesn't necessarily, this is just an example. So in your pairs, read this scenario and reflect, or Gustavo and Anthony, you can reflect on your own, and then we'll share as a group kind of what you think is right, wrong here, how should this be handled?
Who could do that?
I brought this up recently. They're like, Janet, why are you bringing this up again? You're like, no. Well, we never know. Just say.
With
Oh. So is this a true thing that actually happened? I can't imagine very many existing superintendents who would have not told their board that, by the way, everybody in the world is going to be required to wear a mask.
I don't know. I'll leave that to you and see what the
I'm
board.
not from Eastern Oregon now, so I know it was about great.
That's for you to assess, to reflect on.
It would be crazy for anybody, in my opinion, not on the board. Would not, of course, everyone in the world to wear masks inside.
But now replace it with something else. Think of something that maybe potentially, we could replace that with high school mascot. You're changing the high school mascot, for example.
Same thing.
Okay.
Luckily, we're not Oregon City. Having a mascot.
Or can you think of something that maybe wouldn't be the purview of the board and that would be a decision for the superintendent? How about that?
Inclement weather.
There you go.
Every superintendent's least favorite opportunity.
Yeah. Or maybe even, I saw one too, like changing the timing, right, of when school ends or starts.
Right.
Yeah.
Or schedules.
Yep.
Not having bell schedules.
Yep. Okay, so what do you think? I already heard some people say like, absolutely not, this would never happen.
Well, I don't think it never happened. I would say that as the superintendent of Woodburn, I would never impose
Oh,
a mask
gotcha.
mandate without informing my board well ahead
Right.
of time
Right,
and the community and everybody else. But
right. And this is a state mandate, so it's a little.
Yeah.
Um,
They still would know before I told anybody else.
mhm,
By the way, everybody's gonna be mad. And
mhm.
I mean, in my way of looking at that, and with any conflict really, obviously the mistake and, the lack of communication early on already took place. And you're at this point, you can't revoke the mask mandate. Really, if anything, it's more just kind of coming all together and saying, whether in any kind of communication, saying, there's this requirement. It's not that we're, it's state imposed. So you're informing everybody of, why it's coming up. And also at the same time, apologies, we didn't do our best in informing everybody in a timely manner, et cetera, et cetera. But this is OHA guidelines, and we need to be moving forward in this direction. In the future, we will, try to give you 2-week warning, et cetera, of how communication would be improved upon.
Right, and this one, I mean, this one also, because it is a state mandate. Right, and that was kind of sometimes what we heard, is sometimes the community not just understanding the why behind it. There needs to be, and like you said, it can be something as simple as like, we didn't have time to, respond to this like that quickly. Or, making sure that you're preparing and that the superintendent writes something in their newsletter, whatever, however it's going to get communicated, because sometimes it's just that why piece that gets missed. And understanding it. And this one was obviously, you saw it in the news, created a lot of frustration. And a lot of it sometimes was also just that why missing, not all the time, but some of it was that piece of communication. But let's replace that. I did like the idea of replacing it. What if this was though something, and this is why it's important again to understand your roles and responsibilities and what falls under the purview of the board and what falls under the purview of the superintendent, because this is something that is state mandate that, Joe would have to, you just have to do it, right? And the board would need to understand that it's a state law. But let's say now it's, what did you say, Joe?
I said inclement weather.
Inclement weather,
We're on a snow day.
snow day.
That's a good one.
What, how would you feel about, like, what then? Do you know as a board that that's just not your, that's not your that's not your purview, but you need to be aware of it, obviously, that there's a difference between staying informed and then being the one to take the action. That's kind of where I want to differentiate there.
But the inclement weather, and then when there's been closed down or any other incident, people call us, right? Like, how come they?
Yes.
And it's not our choice, right? It's not that, but we trust who's in charge to close down, right?
Yeah.
To let parents know and this and that, and if they telling you not to stop by, not to get by or stop by the school because there's something dangerous, we trust that. We trust the due diligence, from our superintendent. That was the best choice, right, for our students and so on. We are parents and for the kids in the school district, so we trust the process about what's going on and why was the school. So that is another one that creates a lot of controversy.
Yes.
Not only the snow days
Mm-hmm.
or that goes down because of any incident.
I love that you give that example that, the community reaches out to you, because that is usually what happens, is they'll go to you, the board, thinking you have all the answers, right? And say, why is this happening? And you as a board need to know and be able to respond to that, right? And so that's why it's that piece of staying informed. So Joe would probably tell you, right? Because we want to make sure we set those clarifications ahead of time. We're closing down, the school for inclement weather. And you already know that that's something that, falls under superintendent, and you can just say that is a decision at the district level, and make it a moment to inform the community, because oftentimes, like I said earlier, sometimes the board member, nobody knows what a board member does, and neither did you before you ran for the board. And sometimes the community also doesn't understand kind of the process and kind of what the board can and cannot do. And so that's your opportunity as a board member to be able to educate or just let the community know kind of the process there. That this is something that is not under the purview of the board or whatnot, and you can kind of discuss right now. Well, how would you respond to that community member if you get approached? How would you? Do you know? Anthony and Gustavo too, please chime in.
There's been different case scenarios where we have been approached by the community and or we get involved without even knowing that, you know, people are claiming our names that to be the auntie of someone, and we're able to ruin somebody's career or fire someone in the school because we're board members, right? So those are the educational moments that we take on, and, you know, we explain the community. This case was a little girl that, you know, she thought I had all the power to fire someone in the school, and she just yelled at a teacher, at a principal. You know who's my aunt? You know, I'm gonna tell you to fire you. You know, so those are the moments to educate the family and how that family can educate others, you know, in the community.
Word of mouth. Yep.
And then when I used to work, I would still work here, but my office is from home, out of my house. And then I travel around the state, so people don't go and knock on my door any longer. Sometimes, but not as much as when I used to have my office, and people used to go and sit with me and talk to me about problems that they had at school, and because they knew I was the board member, and that was another educational moment, you know. As a board member, I have, as an individual, I don't have no power. As a board member, as the board, as the mesa, you know, the whole, we have this power, but we don't have power to manage what's going on in a different level. We only manage the superintendent. If you have, before they say anything about a problem, they will tell me, I have a problem with the teacher. And now, before you say anything, let me give you the skeleton about how we manage at the school level. I don't have no power. Thank you for coming and trust me, but this is how it goes. That's another educational moment, you know, for our community. So people will come back, but they will come back to ask me for a procedure, not to tell me about something that I will not want to get involved. And and we used to have stories long time ago, 2016, when people will go and talk to some of the board members. And it will be a chaos here in this room. So unfortunately, you know, that we wanted to really educate our parents and our students, and we don't take those opportunities. And we have plenty of opportunities to educate the public.
I like your example, and I'm gonna point you again to your policy. So you mentioned something about individual authority, and I'm glad you did. Your policy BBAA, individual board member authority and responsibility. So when it comes to public complaints, kind of like what you were explaining, it's okay for you as a board member to hear it. You don't want to shut down that community member, right? You want to build that trust and respect, right? You want to also have that trust and respect with your community. So it's great that community members are going to you, but it's how you respond, right? And kind of that's what you were talking about. So I've given the example of a board, like, you know, if they have this issue, you can listen, be empathetic to whatever situation it is, and then let them know, you know, what the next steps are to take, right? That there's a policy you can guide. You don't want to say like file a complaint, but you can guide them to where it's located on the district website. These are the steps. We, as a board member, thank you for sharing that with me. You know, I'm so sorry you're going through this. You can do all that. You cannot speak on behalf of the board. So just be very careful, you're not speaking on behalf of the board, but as an individual, you can express your own opinions, but you need to be very clear that you are stating that. These are my own opinions, and I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry that you're going through this, but, there's a process. We're not the first stop. The board is not the first stop when it comes to public complaints. There's a chain of command, go to that policy, or go to that, go to the district website or ask the district office, for a copy of it. And that's the next steps, and just kind of, and that can be hard. It's not, I'm saying it right now, right? And you're like, yeah, well, sometimes it's not that easy, Janet, right? They want you to take action, but that's what you have to do and that's why it's important for you all to know that that's kind of the expectation. If you are getting approached by a community member, how do you approach that? And it is important for you to understand that as an individual board member, you can express your own opinions, and that's what this policy essentially says. But to speak on behalf of the board, that needs to be approved by the board. So just, be careful that you're not speaking and saying, oh, the board will do this, or I'll talk to the board and see what we can do, or X, Y, and Z. I know you do, but I also want to make sure that your new board members and, people, if they're listening, also are aware that you're that's why you're taking this training, that's why you're doing this transition program. So thank you for sharing, and that was a really good example. Let's go on to contentiousness with board and the board. Oops, sorry. Read this one, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes here. What do you think is right or wrong in this situation? Should this be addressed?
Oh, Janet, was the term you used double robin?
Oh, 2 times Robin.
2 times.
Twice.
I knew it wasn't round robin. 2 times robin.
I'm taking it the 2 board members are siding on the same opinion.
What, sorry?
I take it that the 2 board members are the ones dominating and have the same opinion.
More than likely in this situation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, what do you think here? Let's start with the virtual.
I don't really know, right? Um, I- Context is always helpful, but it's so how I assess it, I guess. There's two conflicting opinions about how to move forward. Not sure what the modified language around looks like, if folks are arguing for a more robust process or a process that's more transparent. I have no clue. But decided that the policy needs to be modified, and then a vote followed. So I guess I'm just curious around what does the new language look like? Do board members, is this a first reading, second reading kind of a thing? Have folks been thinking this over? Is this I don't know. I can't really, I feel pressured to have an opinion, but I don't have an opinion yet.
Yeah, no worries. And that's kind of what I do this. I don't give you all the details because I want you to kind of make your own interpretation as well. And what you just presented too gave a good idea too of like, is it the first or second reading? And some of you maybe I don't think you've done any policy reviews yet, is what I heard earlier. So that's a good question. But I think I want you to focus more on the kind of process that happened here in terms of parliamentary procedure or how you but let me pause there before I give everything away. Let's see anything else.
Gustavo added something.
Oh, yes.
Gustavo says the meeting is losing order and may require the chair to intervene and call for a break or allow others to speak as well.
There we go. Thank you, Gustavo. So he said that this is where the board would call, the chair would call order here. What do you think? Anything else in addition that you noticed in the scenario?
No, I think my main thought was, I hope to be that the chair would step into his role and facilitate.
Right here.
Vice Robin.
Yep, making sure everybody talks. Yep.
It's the same thing. It's sure.
Yep.
I just like the term Vice Robin.
Yeah, and it's actually round robin. I looked it up.
Oh.
But I do like
I
twice
thought
robin.
you'd tell me something new, so I went.
I
from
thought
round
twice, I
robin
think
would
twice
be the-
robin, maybe Vince, because Vince is our parliamentary, like, I would say expert. And I thought I had heard him say, I'm gonna ask him tomorrow.
You asked me, because it could be round robin would be once, and then twice robin would be. then-
Yeah.
then You hear what other government would say, then you may change or continue.
I think it is 2 times robin. That, I think that could be maybe a term he.
That's okay.
called.
Maybe we've all learned something tonight, we'll talk about it.
But regardless, it is important that everyone speaks
That
before a
everyone
second,
speaks,
yeah.
Have a second round to.
Yes, exactly. Here it sounds like only 2 people, right, are dominating. And that's sometimes I've seen it done. This may seem maybe extreme, but it is done. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've seen, it's been done. And I also go to trainings across the state with other states. And so I've heard it as well in other states, not just Oregon. But really, and I love that you said, the chair, you would hope that the chair would step in right before it gets to even a motion, before it even gets to, but again, sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes if you have a new chair, they may not know yet everything and they're still learning and there's a lot of moving pieces sometimes. And so that's why I wanted to just present this as kind of a learning opportunity and walk through it a bit. But let's say if the chair doesn't intervene, do you just let it go on? Do you know what to do if, let's say, maybe the chair is really new and doesn't know that they can intervene, isn't sure what, there's a couple things. Superintendent can help if they know, that to help with the process and remind like, hey, parliamentary procedure, or even the sports secretary. And again, it kind of depends on the culture and climate. That's what's important, to have that trust and respect. And sometimes I have seen that board secretaries will step in just like, hey, reminder or something, or the superintendent as well. But if the chair, let's say, weren't to intervene, what do you think could happen? Who could potentially intervene?
We've seen some of this dynamics and before, and so we usually point it out to Jenny, is this the right way? Because she knows all the policies and the procedures about how we run the meetings, right? And so we usually there's somebody in the board as individuals, they erupt the, going back and forth. It's not always, like you say, black or white, it's always like kind of gray and we tend to intervene at times, because the discussion is going far, where it's late and we just wanted a time out, because it's not going anywhere or, going this way, but not everybody's input.
Yep.
So,
Oftentimes too, another board member could intervene if, there needs to be order, like, hey, point of order, like chair, just kind of nudge a little bit. So there is a lot of different pieces, but again, sometimes it does just go on and a motion is done and a vote is done. And that has to do, and that's why we talk a lot about culture and climate and making sure you, one, know that all of you should speak before, you should be deliberating and getting to that point before a motion is made in a vote. And that's essentially the role of the chair. But sometimes if the chair isn't, following the procedures that you have as a board set, because parliamentary procedure isn't a requirement. You have a policy around parliamentary procedure, and essentially it just says that you will follow parliamentary procedure. It doesn't go into a lot of details, and a lot of boards don't go into a lot of details, and I'm blanking out which policy that is. I also don't have them memorized.
First says that we'll follow Robert.
It says that you'll follow, yeah.
So we always.
Oh, yeah, it's right here. It's policy BDD, board meeting procedures. Yep. And I highlighted the section that says that you will follow Robert's rule. Okay, I'm going to move us along. We're almost out of time. And but I think that, again, I didn't want to cut you off on your discussions, but if you can skip the next scenario, and I'll table that for next time potentially. And that's around community, so we'll table that. But we kind of already talked about this, superintendent's role can be a mediator, remind the board about policies, remind the board about rules of order, recommend, or suggest, assist the chair with the operational management of the meetings. Next slide. The chair's role too, is to make sure that things are also running smoothly. So the facilitator makes sure the board chair understands the policies, make sure they understand the use of Robert's Rule of Order and also the point of order, which some of you already mentioned. So that's just kind of summarizing what you all said. And then yes, there's your policy BDD. You can go forward. And essentially parliamentary is just a great way to help make your meetings run smoothly and making sure that everyone gets a chance to speak, making sure that you are fully deliberating and everyone is getting that fair opportunity to chime in and speak. This is just a nice little diagram. Vince actually created it, so I'm not going to take credit. As I mentioned, he's kind of our parliamentary procedure expert. But this is kind of just a brief diagram to show how the different types of motions. Usually there's either a motion to postpone, a motion to amend, or to vote. Most of the time you're going to be doing that voting, but before that's done, you make sure there's a main motion, it gets seconded, then you have a discussion for debate, and then it goes into either voting, amending, or postponing. And so it's just a nice little diagram to just kind of remind you of kind of what that looks like. And again, this isn't a requirement, but it is very helpful for boards, and we do recommend you have some sort of procedure for how you're going to run your meetings, whether it's Robert's Rules of Order, etc. Next slide. I skipped this one because we're going to talk about community next time. And next time we're going to be, I'm going to skip this through, but feel free to kind of glance through this. I'll be discussing it more so that we can, and based on the discussions we already had, maybe you can start thinking of what are some areas that you as a board want to prioritize in your operating agreements, because next time we're going to do an activity and you're going to develop a board operating agreement and a board superintendent operating agreement. It's going to be a one-pager doc. Something, again, it's going to waive you're going to have to adopt it formally, and it basically floats the way of policy once adopted. And again, I'll walk through all of that next time, but this is why we're having this discussion tonight, so that you can start to think for next time how you're going to prioritize your areas that you need to work on to ensure that you're effectively functioning as a board. Next, that's just an example. Email correspondence can sometimes be an area that needs to be prioritized. You already mentioned, I mentioned some other examples like marathon meetings. Don't spring surprises. Take a glance at it. You don't have to, just maybe review it before next time. It will be helpful. Next. I'm gonna just skip the reflection piece, but I do want to end with just going over this standard around board member. I was gonna ask you to reflect, stop there. I was gonna ask you to reflect, but I'm just gonna run through kind of the importance of the board superintendent relationship, which is again, one of the key reasons why we're having this training. Next. So it is important for you to understand that the superintendent is your only direct employee. You can hit all of them actually if you want. The superintendent is your main connection to the district, and that's why we were talking about why it's important for you to stay informed of what's happening at the district and understanding that sometimes it may not fall under the purview of the board, and so you may not get the information all the time. But it's really important for you to have that trust and respect. I liked what one of you said earlier, I believe it was you, Laura, that you hire the superintendent, you trust that the superintendent is going to take care of those day-to-day operations at the district level. That's why it's important when you are hiring a superintendent that you are setting already that tone. And that's why we're having this transition program, because that partnership is not going to work if there is no trust. Because you already went through the process, your executive search, so you trust that Joe is going to get that work done. The strategic plan is going to get done. He's going to give you updates when needed. Kind of talked already about, and we'll talk more next time because we're running out of time, but of how you can get updates on the strategic plan and maybe do some more deep dive work in work sessions. But really, and then the importance of authority and limits. So next. We talked already a lot about, how to keep each other informed. This is a balanced governance that is Tom Alsbury's, and that's the researcher that we partnered with for the standards. And essentially, and I heard some of you say this already, essentially you as a board don't want to be on one side of the continuum where you're just disengaged and rubber stamping during meetings. You're looking at policies that you feel like a rubber stamper. But you also don't want to be on the opposite side where you're overreaching or what we call micromanaging into the day-to-day operations of the district. That's why I asked you about the reports. Like, what really are you getting? Is it information that the board needs, or is it just, it's really important for you to know what information you need from the superintendent to stay informed and to stay informed so that you can make informed decisions on policy, the budget, etc., things like that. So that's really what this is saying, is you don't want to be on either side of the continuum. You want to be in that informed oversight. You want to be informed, have a good relationship with your superintendent where you're going to be informed about the pieces of information that you need. So when you are making those decisions, when you're having deliberations on certain policies, on certain action items, that you feel prepared and you feel like you've received the information you need. Next.
And, when Jenny was, when she, show hands, and I was like, second, I wanted to also go into that, because sometimes we take these to a heart, our as a member, as a board member, we take it to so deeply, and we want to know more details than what we should. And sometimes I feel like people feel micromanagement, because because we ask questions that those are pertaining to the superintendent, right? Because anyway, so that's what I was gonna say. But we will continue with the conversation.
No, I love that you bring that up. I mean, don't feel like we have to run through these slides. I'd rather, you ask questions and we engage in things like that, because you're right. There's a difference between being passionate about something versus micromanaging. And that's where it can be really difficult. And that's why I say the lines aren't always black and white. And so that's what the purpose of the board operating agreement is, to set some clear expectations so you all know how you're operating, how, if you do reach out to Joe, he knows that you're not reaching out because you want to know all the details, and you already have said, that you trust Joe, right? You hired him because you trust him. And I was going to walk you through a couple of policies where basically it reiterates that, kind of the power and duties of the superintendent versus the power and duties of the board. But there are things, where it is going to be okay. And Joe, would have to also sometimes set that boundary too, right? And so but you need to make sure that it's done with mutual respect. It's not that Joe doesn't want to give you information. It's just, he needs to be able to set boundaries too. And the board needs to understand that those boundaries are there for a reason. It's not because he wants to keep you in the dark or feels that this is, it's because it's something that doesn't fall under the board's purview. You can be informed, but now taking it a step further where you want something done about it, whether it's, like we already gave an example of like school closures or inclement weather, right? That is the decision that your superintendent gets to make, not the board. Board will be informed, right? That's the difference, is that informed, which is why I showed you that continuum, versus the board telling Joe, like, get this done, get this done, like, that's what you want to avoid, is the board kind of telling Joe, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? More so it's, okay, we know Joe already, we set the direction for Joe of what we want, and that's what those district goals are. And we're gonna talk about that next time, because I'm not gonna have the time to do that tonight, but that's why we call it setting the direction of where the board envisions the district to be in the next 2, 3 to 4 years as part of your strategic plan. And then trusting that Joe's going to take that direction that you get to create and figure out how it gets done. And then you staying informed of how it is getting done. Because we don't want those district goals to just be posted on a wall or on your website. We want you, the board, and that's your role as a board, is to make sure that they are getting done and that you're holding the system accountable. That's one way that you hold the system accountable.
And we're moving the needle on.
Yeah, right. But it's not you looking at, every single piece of the strategic plan and whatnot. Okay, so these are just a couple policies, and they're in your packet. And again, I won't walk through them. They're highlighted. Policy CBA around qualifications and duties of the superintendent. Take a look at that one, CBA, but essentially it's what I just said. This is the responsibilities of the superintendent. And then, so policy CBA, let me just go walk you through that real quick. It's in alphabetical order, so should be towards the middle.
CBA.
CBA. Okay, yeah. And just look at the highlighted section. There's a lot in here, but really it's kind of what we already talked about, but general functions, especially number 1, states that the superintendent is the chief executive officer under the direction of the board, is responsible for control and operation, which is what I was just talking about, operation of the school system, and for implementing the decisions and policies of the board. That's another piece too, is that the board, you approve policies and you get that final say for the approval, but how things get implemented or if there's a procedure, that's Joe's responsibility. So those are called administrative regulations. And you have a couple samples in here with like public comment. You have an AR, which is an administrative regulation. Public complaint also has an administrative regulation. And then I just highlight a couple other things, again, assume responsibility for carrying into effect the policies, develop administrative regulations and procedures for implementing those policies, serves as a budget officer. So take a glance at this, and especially just, I highlighted just some key pieces, but it's really just reiterating what I'm just telling you right now. And then right here, number 17, report to the board on a regular basis concerning the status of the district programs. I would even say more so the strategic plan. The other policy BBAA now has the board powers and duties. So if you go to the beginning, that's the first one of your policy, BBAA, we just looked at the powers and duties of the superintendent. But for the board, pay attention to that last piece here under executive that I have highlighted. So the board will appoint a superintendent, delegate to establish administrative regulations, which is what I was just talking about, to implement board policy and goals. The board will evaluate the superintendent's performance, which we'll get to next time because we ran out of time today. The board will establish goals for the district and evaluate the superintendent implementation of those goals. So that's the piece I'm talking about, where you set the direction, which is those goals, and then making sure there's, how are you evaluating and making sure that those goals are being met. Okay. And then the last one that has a lot of what I like to call the board's best friend is policy BBF. This is one that you as a board should definitely be familiarized with. and that is board member standards of conduct. So BBF, board's best friend. And again, it's kind of covering everything that I already kind of emphasized, but look through the pieces that I highlighted. So number 2, understand that the board sets the standards for the district or the district direction. Board members do not manage the district day-to-day basis. We already talked about that the board makes decisions as a quorum. Individual board members may not commit the board to any action. Respect the right of other board members to have opinions and ideas. We talked already a lot about that. Understand the chain of command. We talked about that in terms of policy KL, which is public complaints. Number 10 is really important to be open, fair, and honest, no hidden agendas. And we can talk more about that next time when we're talking around board operating agreements. Number 14 is also a big one that I usually have a discussion with boards around. It's, refuse to bring personal or family problems into board considerations. And this one can be difficult sometimes to remove that hat, because if you have insight, let's say if you have a student at the district and you have inside scoop of like, you're hearing things about a teacher or students or whatnot, staff in general, making sure that whatever it is that you're hearing, how it is affecting all students. And that can be really hard when you have, or you have, community members that you talk to on a regular basis or something like that. But that is a big one, to make sure that you as a board are keeping that lens of how is this impacting all students, and not just hearing just kind of one problem and focusing in on that problem, right? And oftentimes I will say that those problems are not even the purview of the board. Typically that's something more at the district level. And we already covered policy BBAA. Okay, we're out of time. I was gonna do a game with you all, but I'll leave it for next time. Hopefully Gustavo and Anthony can be here so we can do that game next time of just covering some other areas of when it's the role of the board versus the superintendent. And I don't know if Vince covered this with you or not. Did he play a game, a policy game with you all? Okay, we'll leave it for next time. But overall, I'm just gonna finish it by saying, you go to the next couple of slides. We're gonna skip through a few.
I think he did.
He did.
Yeah.
I want to, oh, he did? Okay. I want to go to the last. Flipping through, it should say governance versus management. Slide number 60.
I don't know why it's on that.
Let's see.
Yeah, there's a lot. Usually my trainings for roles and responsibilities is 3 hours, but I'm trying to implement it into a lot of different. I'm trying to tie it into specifically your, keep going. It should say governance and management. I'll just wrap up with this last part. I think Vince covered, okay, right here. So overall, you as a board, your governance, you govern, you're the what you want to have happen, which is why I said you set a direction for the district for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And then the superintendent is that management piece, determines how the what happens, how it's going to get done. Go to the next one. Just kind of in a nutshell, which we kind of already covered, and it's in your policy, but this is just to summarize. The board, you hire and evaluate the superintendent. We're going to talk more about that next time. Ooh, go back.
Sorry.
There you go. Sets the district priorities and goals, adopts policy, and oversees the budget. Next. And monitors progress of the goal. Superintendent helps hire staff, turns those priority goals into action with the strategic plan, implements policies and develops administrative regulations, plans expenditures and manages the budget, and reports on progress of the district goals. Next. And then that's just your standard, this is standard 11 around board member code of conduct. And really it's about having a mutual understanding of your respective roles and, which is going to help you just have that collaborative governance that I mentioned at the beginning and having that good culture and climate of team building. So I'm going to end there. We didn't get to cover everything. Next time I want to continue where we left off, and I want to cover strategic planning a little bit because you are in that right now, and kind of how the board can set up a system for how to get updates on the strategic plan and how to maybe monitoring also the district goals are being how you know that those goals are being met, because I know you have 3 goals. I believe one is all students will graduate and ready to pursue college, strengthen your culture and engagement, and further strengthen. Are those your district goals? Okay, so we'll continue there, and then I want to dive into community engagement a little bit more. And then we'll dive into the superintendent evaluation next time and do an activity with your board operating agreement. So that's my plan for next time. Sorry we weren't able to cover everything in 2 hours that I had, or 2.5 hours. Anything else? Do you have any questions for me? What were your aha moments? And we're gonna meet on December 13th is the next meeting. And that's 3 hours again?
Mhm.
Okay. And one actually, you said there'll be one item ahead of time. Okay. Okay. Well, I know it's been a long night.
Mhm.
I appreciate everyone's engagement, because that's really when it's the most valuable, is when you all give your ideas and perspectives and share your past experiences or current experiences. So we will just continue where we left off and tackle the superintendent evaluation, which is a big piece. But tonight we kind of basically covered the roles and responsibilities. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will continue on December 13th.
Thank you.